Shalom, holy initiates and holy adepts. This is going to be a very advanced Kabbalistic video dealing with what in Kabbalah is known as Ma'aseh Bereshit, which is the account of creation and all of the mysteries and secrets contained there within, as well as a disquisition on certain mysteries and secrets of Shabbath. Because, Shabbath is a subset of the account of creation. And so essentially the reason why I'm doing this video, one of the reasons is because I think it's important to reveal some of these secrets and mysteries regarding the account of creation. I find that the vast majority of not just Christians but Jews just simply don't have a full, comprehensive, and more importantly, correct understanding of the account of creation. Usually, more often than not, this is due to the fact that they don't know Hebrew, they haven't been initiated, and in some cases, they just don't have very high intellects and very high reading comprehensions. And I'm a very understanding man, and I understand that, this is just, part of the diversity of mankind. The problem usually gets to being when you have very proud, egotistical, religious individuals who usually, get out of place, and, are very dogmatic about their erroneous understandings of the Holy Divine Scriptures, not knowing it. But usually these are the problem people, and I usually just, 99% of the time, if I'm discussing Shabbath and the true essence of Shabbath, the true correct Shabbath, or the account of creation, I find there's just too many individuals, Christians and Jews, that haven't been initiated and are very ignorant regarding these two topics and these two subjects at hand. And the reason I'm doing a video about these two subjects is because whenever I'm discoursing and proving the true correct Shabbat to many ignorant Jews and Christians, they usually like to go back to the account of creation. And that's usually a big problem because they just don't have a full, correct understanding of the account of creation and what's truly going on there. We have to understand that the account of creation is the first part of the Torah. It's originally in Hebrew, and there's a lot going on there. There's a lot of secrets, a lot of mysteries, and just a lot of stuff going on there. And if you're not fluent in Hebrew, if you don't have a solid foundation in true ancient Orthodox Judaism, and have been initiated into esoteric wisdom, then there's no place for you to even begin discoursing on a high level of the account of creation. So with that little preamble, I begin with our most ancient grandmaster, Jewish Kabbalist, one of my favorites, if not my most favorite, Philon Judaeus. Now, Philon Judaeus is a very special ancient grandmaster Jewish Kabbalist because not only is he the most ancient Jewish Kabbalist, grandmaster Kabbalist that we have on record, aside from Yeshua and Kepha, but we have to understand that Philon Judaeus was initiated from a very early age, and not only that, but he has an extraordinarily very, very high intellect, very high intelligence quotient and spiritual quotient. So this is this is one of the most exceptional, grandmaster Jewish Kabbalists, from antiquity, from the generation of Yeshua. So his treatises are a treasure trove of wisdoms, to say the least. Now he has a very, very extremely extraordinarily Kabbalistic. He has a few very Kabbalistic treatises dealing with the account of creation, okay, from a Kabbalistic / allegorical perspective, okay, and of all of the books, on Ma'aseh Bereshit, dealing with the mysteries and secrets of creation, in my humble opinion, I think that Philon Judaeus' treatises dealing with Ma'aseh Bereshit are probably the most Kabbalistic and most advanced of even among many ancient Jewish Kabbalistic books that are originally written in Hebrew. And that is how high level, how intellectual and Kabbalistic Philon Judaeus' writings are. Okay, I think to begin initiation into Ma'aseh Bereshit, I think the best treatise to begin this initiation would be with Philon Judaeus' treatises dealing with Ma'aseh Bereshit. So with that said, I begin in his first treatise entitled On the Creation. In line 13, speaking on Ma'aseh Bereshit, he states, he says that in 6 days the world was created, not that its maker required a length of time for his work, for we must think of Elohim as doing all things simultaneously, remembering that quote-unquote all includes within the commands which he issues the thought behind them. 6 days are mentioned because for the things coming into existence there was need of order. Order involves number, and among numbers, by the laws of nature, the most suitable to productivity is 6. For if we start with 1, it is the first perfect number, being equal to the product of its factors. Example, 1 times 2 times 3, as well as made up of the sum of them. Example, 1 plus 2 plus 3. Its half being 3, its third part 2, its sixth part 1. We may say that it is in its nature both male and female, and it is a result of the distinctive power of either. For among things that are it is the that is male and the even female. So here in this very advanced Kabbalistic passage, Philon Judaeus makes the first very most momentous point, which is that we are not to understand these 7 days of the account of creation as time as it is understood by the vulgar and the laity, because it's very ignorant and in many cases very foolish to have that understanding, because Elohim is outside of time. Who is creating the universe in this passage? It's Elohim. Ha-Elohim, is creating the universe, an entity that is outside of the domain and constraints of time. And as such, then this first creation, this first high creation, must be outside of time as a result. For Elohim's domain is in eternity, and in the highest levels of eternity. And so again, I repeat, it is very ignorant, very foolish. Okay, you are either a very foolish, silly babe, or you're just very ignorant, or you don't have a high intellect if your understanding of Ma'aseh Bereshith is in regards to time as it is understood by the vulgar and the laity. This is what he is saying here. With Elohim, everything is simultaneously because his domain is eternity. So essentially, these 7 days are supposed to be understood conceptually as order. Okay, so these are, the understanding of these 7 days, the understanding is supposed to be a very high-level mathematical and conceptual understanding of order, an abstract understanding of order and rank, not time. Okay, then falling back on occult mathematics, he then starts discoursing on, some of the mathematical attributes and properties of these numbers, which are in essence ideas and constructs. Namely, that the number 6 in occult mathematics is known as a perfect number, which is defined as a number that is equal to the product of its factors as well as the sum of its factors. So 6 is a very, very unique and very special number in this sense. Okay, so there are very Kabbalistic and esoteric meanings behind these numbers in Ma'aseh Bereshith, which Philon Judaeus is elaborating on in this passage. Okay, so now we continue on another passage. This is in line 60, where he will define time for us. Now, his definition of time here is the correct definition of time as it is understood by all holy initiates, adepts, and by the most wisest of the ancients, okay, which included Philon Judaeus, this Grandmaster Jewish Kabbalist. Okay, now this is very important to understand what's going to be read here, because again, practically the entire vulgar and laity for the past 2,000 years has had a very, very incorrect understanding of time and its quintessence. Time isn't really understood by the vulgar and the laity, most especially, which would include practically all Christians and even Jews to a large extent. Okay? This again goes back to one of my problems when I'm discoursing on these, on these topics with most Christians and Jews, is that they're very, very ignorant in regards to time. Their understanding, their conception of time is just they don't have a very full understanding of time. They have very fallacious and erroneous conceptions of time. They don't fully understand it. Okay, so here I will read to you the correct definition, how time is truly understood by us holy initiates and adepts. Okay, he states The heavenly bodies were created also to furnish measures of time, for it is by regular revolutions of sun, moon, and other bodies that days and months and years were constituted. This in itself involved the showing of their most useful service of all, I mean number, as part of the world's order, time by its mere lapse, indicating it. Okay, again, the proper definition of time is that it is a function of the revolution of the luminaries in the heavens, which are Elohim, the emphasis being put on the small e, Elohim with a small e. Okay? Again, what I just said here, what I have just elucidated here, is not understood by the vulgar and the laity, let alone by practically all Christians and Jews. Okay? And there are many great Kabbalistic mysteries that branch off of this very basic foundational essence of time, which is beyond the scope of this video, which I will not get into. Needless to say, the important momentous point to understand here is the correct definition of time. Again, namely, it is a function of the revolution of the luminaries in the heavens. Okay, ergo, the circular nature and essence of time itself. Again, time is not linear. Okay, for over 2,000 years, many of the ignorant goyim, okay, which include many Christians and Jews, have thought of time as having a linear structure, when in fact, time, the essence of time is circular in nature, not linear. Okay, so now we're going to go back to the first passage that I first read, dealing with the correct understanding of Ma'aseh Bereshit in the first parasha of HaTorah. Okay, our understanding of these 7 days of creation is not to be as time is understood by most of the laity. Okay, continuing to discourse, okay, on this, he states in lines 26 to 27, then he says that in the beginning Elohim made the heaven and the earth, taking the beginning not as something in a chronological sense, for time there was not before there was a world. Time began either simultaneously with the world or after it, for since time is a measured space determined by the world's movement, and since movement cannot be prior to the object moving, but must of necessity arise either after it or simultaneously with it, it follows of necessity that time also is either coeval with or later born in the world. To venture to affirm that it is elder born would be to do violence to philosophical sense. Okay, again, it is only we initiates and adepts that have the true correct understanding of Ma'aseh Bereshit. He is telling here explicitly that only the elite know that Ma'aseh Bereshit is not supposed to be understood in a chronological sense. In other words, we are not to understand the 7 days in a chronological sense. It has no relation to time in of itself. These 7 days represent archetypal, seals of time, okay, which in of itself is just a very grand, comprehensive topic to even get into right now. Okay, it's well beyond the canon scope of this video. The point being is that we're not supposed to understand Ma'aseh Bereshit and the 7 days in a chronological sense, as relating to time as it is understood by the vulgar and the laity and the uneducated and uninitiated, which unfortunately represent most of Christianity and to a large extent Judaism. Okay? So continuing and discoursing this, he states, it is not here taken as the chronological beginning. It would seem likely that the numerical order is indicated, so that in the beginning he made is equivalent to he made the heaven first. For it is indeed reasonable that it should come into existence first, being both best of created things and made from the purest of all that is, seeing that it was destined to be the most holy dwelling place of manifest and visible Elohim. For even if the Maker made all things simultaneously, order was nonetheless an attribute of all that came into existence in fair beauty, for beauty is absent where there is disorder. Again, this just goes against the same line what I've been repeating thus far. Okay, namely that these 7 days of creation represent higher archetypal understandings of time. Okay, which leads us into very abstract mathematics, mathematical constructs, and numerical orders, etc. Okay, so again, this is the correct, true understanding of Maaseh Bereshit and the 7 days. Now, understand that there are many levels to the 7 days of creation. There are many levels, and I'm obviously not going to get into all of the levels, Kabbalistic levels of these 7 days of creation, of which there are many. We are right now dealing with one Kabbalistic level, dealing with the actual process of creation by Ha-Elohim on these 7 days. We're not dealing with the more esoteric levels of these 7 days. We're just dealing with the correct, very advanced understanding of these 7 days of creation. Okay? Now, this then sidetracks us just for a while to true astrology, because astrology has everything to do with the account of creation and the luminaries that were created therein. Okay, in line 58, Philon states, the purpose of their existence, speaking on the existence of the luminaries, is that Adonai himself pronounced not only to send forth light upon the earth, but also to give timely signs of coming events, for either by their risings or settings or eclipses, or again by the seasons of their appearance or disappearance, or by other alterations in their movements, men conjecture future issues, good harvests and bad, increase and decay of animal life, fair weather and foul, gales and calms, floodings and shrinkings of rivers, seas smooth and rough, irregularities of the seasons, either wintry summers or scorching winters, or springs like autumn or autumns like spring. Indeed, it has happened that by conjecture based on the movements of the heavenly bodies, men have notified in advance a disturbance and shaking of the earth, and countless other unusual occurrences, proving the complete truth of the words, quote, the stars were made for signs. Right? This is just a very, very basic understanding of the Holy Ancient Scriptures. The luminaries were made for signs upon the earth. These signs are of many, diverse topics, whether it be the weather, harvests or agriculture or war, economic collapses, etc. This all goes back to the true primeval art and science of astrology, as was most definitely understood and mastered by the ancients, but which unfortunately was lost to antiquity, and in some cases corrupted and perverted by the moderns. And so this is why in the last 2,000 years, for the most part, much of astrology has just been lost to antiquity. And much of what exists or is called astrology today is nothing more than a pseudo-art and a pseudo-science. Find me an astrologer that can correctly predict many of future events just based on the luminaries. I've yet to know of one in this generation alone. Okay, so again, this is very basic. Anyone, any ignorant Christian, or Jew who states that astrology, is a subset of witchcraft or black magic or of Hasatan or Lucifer, truly demonstrates their ignorance at a very profound level. Okay, for the most basic understandings of the ancient Holy Scriptures, they are either ignorant of or have simply gone way over their head. And by the way, I also have a couple of videos on my channel dealing with this true primeval art and science of astrology and proving it from the ancient scriptures. So if you would like to know a little bit more about astrology, especially within the Holy Scriptures, then I suggest you go and watch those videos that I have on astrology. Now, going back to the topic at hand, discoursing on day 1, Philon Judaeus in line 35 states, when light had come into being, and darkness had moved out of its way and retired, and evening and dawn had been fixed as barriers in the intervals between them, as a necessary consequence, a measure of time was forthwith brought about, which its maker called day, and not first day, but one, an expression due to the uniqueness of the intelligible world, and to its having therefore a natural kinship to the number 1. Now, in this passage, Philon Judaeus touches upon a few very, very high-level esoteric Kabbalistic mysteries. Okay, on one level, he's duly noting, as a very highly initiated Grandmaster Kabbalist, that a measure of time is being introduced in day 1. That's what day 1 is all about. It's a measurement of time that is being introduced on a very mystical Kabbalistic level. And so we may say Kabbalistically that 7 measurements of time are introduced by these 7 days. Again, time when I'm saying time here, when we are using this word time, and it's not to be understood, again, as it is understood by the vulgar and the laity and the uninitiated and the uneducated. Our concept of time here is very much different. It is a measurement of movement, divine movement. Okay, so that's one very high level Kabbalistic mystery, which, you know, can have a whole book written on it. Okay, the second great Kabbalistic mystery has to do with the Torah distinguishing between day one and the other days. Now, here Philonia Days is proving and demonstrating that he has a mastery and is fluent in the ancient Hebrew language. Because if you are fluent in Hebrew and had read the first parasha of Bereshit in the original ancient Hebrew, you would duly know, even as a lay Hebrew speaker or a lay ancient Hebrew, that the Torah is clearly distinguishing between day one and the other days. How so? Well, he tells you here. The first day, it doesn't say, and it was evening and it was morning the first day. It states one day one. It says day one, not first day. So this thing goes to the mystery of the 7 days, because day one is written with a cardinal number in the original Hebrew vis-a-vis echad, which means one. It doesn't use the Hebrew word rishon, which means first. In other words, the original Hebrew in the Torah says it was evening and it was morning, yom echad, day one. It doesn't say yom rishon, first day. It says yom echad. Whereas with the rest, with days 2 to 7, days 2 to 7 are written with ordinal numbers, indicating rank and order, because day one is written with a cardinal number, which generally speaking indicates quantity. Days 2 to 7 are written with ordinal numbers, indicating rank and order. So mystically, on a very, very recondite and mystical level, the Torah is telling you, hey, pay very close special attention to what's going on here. There's a very big difference between day one and the other days. There are a lot of attributes that are separating day one from the rest of the days. And it is indicated through the fact that the days are written differently. Day one is written with the cardinal number as opposed to the rest of the days, which are written with ordinal numbers. Okay, and again, a whole other book can be written just on this great Kabbalistic mystery, because there are many great Kabbalistic mysteries that just branch out from this very mystical indication in the Torah itself. Okay, which now leads me to begin a recap of the 4 universes in Qabbalah. So if you haven't seen, I have a very short video that gives a very high-level overview of what the 4 universes or levels of reality are and their scriptural proofs. Okay, if you haven't seen that video, I highly suggest that you go and see it, because this video, deals in large part. The rest of this video from this moment going forward is going to deal in large part with the 4 levels of reality, or the 4 universes. Okay. So I'm assuming that that you meet this prerequisite and that you have a basic understanding of these 4 universes. Now, we need to understand that in Qabbalah, we understand that there are an infinite number of universes. They're all parallel. So there's an infinite number of parallel universes in all of existence. Okay, and we Kabbalists understand, we know that even though there's an infinite number of parallel universes, that we basically divide them into 4 classes or 4 orders, and this is what's known as the 4 the 4 universes or levels of reality, which are mystically indicated in the Tetragrammaton, which is represented by 4 letters. These 4 letters of the Tetragrammaton mystically allude to these 4 levels of reality, or these 4 universes that are parallel. Okay, and we need to understand that even though we have 4 classes of or 4 levels of reality or parallel universes, within each of these 4 parallel universes, there are an infinite number of universes. Okay, so there's an infinite upon infinite number of universes. Qabbalah, the whole study of Qabbalah is to create a systemized, hierarchy and study of these many infinite universes, beginning with subdividing them into 4 classes, and then there are subclassifications within each order or class of these universes. Okay, and the account of creation deals essentially at the core of Ma'aseh Bereshit, the mysteries and secrets of the account of creation. We know that the account of creation is dealing with the beginning of creation, starting in the highest universe, which is Atzilut, and moving down into the lowest universe or level of reality, which is the one we inhabit, which is called Asiya. Okay, now again, this is a very highly Kabbalistic and esoteric topic that is, unfortunately, I don't even think understood by even most, Orthodox Jewish Kabbalists. Okay, so now I'm going to demonstrate and show and point this out in the first parsha of Bereshith. Okay, the mystery of creation, at least one of these grand mysteries of creation, is that, as I have just indicated to you, day 1 represents the highest incorporeal archetypal creation. Okay, essentially that's what day 1 contains. It represents the highest incorporeal archetypal creation, right? On day 1, the heavens and the earth are created. The key word here is created. Okay, in Hebrew, the root verb for create is bara. Okay, this is why the first verse of the Torah begins with Breshith bara Elohim. Okay, so we have creation going on in the first verse. Now, this is a mystical indicator that this level of creation on day 1 is associated and corresponds to the second level or the second universe, which is Bria, which is the level of creation. And this level is a highly incorporeal and archetypal universe. It's the universe full of some of the highest archetypes, or incorporeal archetypes, really, to be more specific. Okay, so these heavens and these earths that are created on day 1 are the incorporeal archetypal heavens and earth, which will serve as a template for subsequent reproductions of it, which would represent its images. Okay, now the accusative particle eth, which is the aleph tau, is affixed to both the heavens and the earth in the first verse of the Torah. Okay, the first verse of the Torah reads, Reshith bara Elohim eth hashemayim with haaretz, right? You have the accusative particle affixed to both hashemayim, the heavens, and haaretz, which is the earth. Okay, now we, as holy initiates and holy adepts, should already know and understand that hermeneutically, based on very ancient veracious exegesis handed to us down by by Moshe and the 70 elders, we know that hermeneutically this accusative particle also on another level represents additions to the word that it is affixed to. So in this case, since it is affixed to the heavens, this object then tells us that this not only includes the entire heavens, but everything that it contains there within, which would include the luminaries, the stars, etc. Likewise, the same applies to its affixtion to the earth as a complete object. Okay, this then tells us that we'eth haaretz, as a complete object, then represents not just the earth, but everything that it contains there within. Okay, which would be verdure, mountains, etc. Okay, so again, this is why day 1 is separated from the rest of the days, because day 1, we're talking about the creation of the heavens and the earth and everything that it contains, but in Bria. So this is the creation of the highest incorporeal archetypes. Okay, very, very important to understand. Okay, now we are going to speak on their images. Right? On the second day, it states that the heavens are made. Again, duly note the key distinction. On day 1, the heavens are created, corresponding to Bria, but on the second day, the heavens are made, corresponding to Asiya. Okay, the Hebrew word there for the heavens are made, the Hebrew word that's used there for the heavens being made, comes from the Hebrew root verb asa, which means to make. This is why the last universe is called Asiya, which comes from the Hebrew verb asa, which means to make. It is the world of making or action. Okay? And so now on the second day, we have an image of these incorporeal archetypal heavens being made. These heavens are corporeal. So the second day is speaking on the creation or making of the actual corporeal heavens as we know them. And on the third day, we see that the earth is also made. Again, corresponding to Asiya. Okay? So we have to understand that on a most basic Kabbalistic level, and bear in mind that even though I'm saying that it's a simple Kabbalistic level, we are still dealing with a very esoteric and mystical understanding of Maaseh Bereshit, right? Vis-a-vis the archetype and the image. Day one is speaking on the creation of the archetypes, and the subsequent days are speaking on the creation of their images, the images of the archetype of the archetypes. Okay, so day one, the archetypal incorporeal heavens and earth are created, and then on the subsequent days you have the heavens and the earth being made, which are images of these incorporeal archetypes. So we have to understand that when these words are being used back and forth, heavens, earth, they're not always referencing the same objects. Okay, another example on this level deals with Adam Kadmon. We read in Sefer Bereshit in chapter 1, verse 26 to 27, it speaks on the creation of Adam Kadmon, corresponding to Bria. This is the creation of the archetypal incorporeal Adam Kadmon. But when you fast forward to chapter 2 in Sefer Bereshit, it talks about Adam being formed. There, the Hebrew word, that's used for the formation of Adam comes from the Hebrew root verb yetzirah, which means, to form. Ergo, the reason why this Adam Kadmon corresponds to the universe of Yetzirah, or formation. So again, going back to what I first said regarding this great grand mystery, is that essentially what Maaseh Bereshit is elucidating and telling us, initiates and adepts who are initiated, it is revealing to us this very grand process of creation through the four universes, or the four levels of reality, moving from the highest incorporeal archetypes down to their corporeal, actionized images, as we know them here, in our construct. Okay, now we'll move on to the mystery of the order of adornment, which is a very, very profound Kabbalistic mystery that is indicated, again, in Maaseh Bereshit. Again, we go back to our Grand Master Jewish Kabbalist Philon Yudeis in lines 45 to 46. Expounding on this great mystery, he states, now here in expounding on the great mystery, he is speaking of the ancient uneducated and uninitiated Goyim. And speaking on them, in regards to this great mystery, he states that they would trust phenomena rather than Elohim, admiring sophistry more than wisdom, and how they would observe in time to come the circuits of the sun and the moon, on which depends summer and winter and the changes of spring and autumn, and would suppose that the regular movements of the heavenly bodies are the causes of all things that year by year come forth and are produced out of the earth, that there might be none who, owing either to shameless audacity or to overwhelming ignorance, should venture to ascribe the first place to any created thing. Let them, said he, go back in thought to the original creation of the universe, when before sun or moon existed, the earth bore plants of all sorts and fruits of all sorts. And having contemplated this, let them form in their minds the expectation that hereafter too shall it bear these at the Father's bidding, whensoever it may please him. For he has no need of his heavenly offspring, on which he bestowed powers, but not independence. For like a charioteer grasping the reins, or a pilot the tiller, he guides all things in what direction he pleases, as law and right demand. Again, here, this great Kabbalistic mystery has to do with our understanding that the luminaries, which are Elohim, are the offspring of Ha Elohim, okay? And they are the intermediaries between the universe of Atziluth, which is the domain of Ha Elohim, and our universe, which is the universe of Asiya, and everything that happens here on Earth. They basically run and control much of what happens below here on Earth, okay? And so we're saying, well, many of the ancient Goyim, even though they were uninitiated and uneducated, were still had a basic intelligence to understand from their observance of the luminaries that indeed this is the case. But because they were uninitiated and uneducated, they were not able to distinguish or know between the true Ha Elohim and the lower Elohim with the small e, which are the luminaries. Okay? Now, this great mystery in the Torah is that we find that the earth is adorned before the heavens. The earth in the universe of Asiya is adorned before the heavens in the universe of Asiya. That's a great mystery because, again, going back to the Goyim throughout this entire Aeon, the uneducated and uninitiated Goyim in this entire Aeon have understood that it is the heavens that are responsible for the conditions here on Earth. But in the account of creation, we find that it was not the heavens that were responsible for the adornment of the earth, but Ha Elohim himself. And this great mystery has to do with the admonishment of these uneducated and untrained Goyim, who don't know any better. This mystery is to allude to the autonomy of Ha Elohim. And the dependence of the Elohim with the small e upon Ha Elohim. Or I should really say Elohei Yisrael. Now, again, this is a very, very, very great Kabbalistic mystery. And again, many mysteries branch out just from this mystery alone. Now we will move forward to talk on the mystery of time, which, as I said in the beginning of this video, is something that is just not fully correctly understood by the vast majority, if not all, Goyim, which again includes a lot of Christians and Jews. Okay? Now we find that on the fourth day, the sun and the moon are made. Again, these luminaries correspond to the universe of Asiya. So essentially, quintessentially, time comes into existence on the fourth day. As you should already understand by now, based on what I have already previously stated. Time is a construct of Asiya, and only of the universe Asiya. Eternity and its infinite levels are the higher archetypes of time in the higher universes. And I say eternity and its levels because as a mathematical genius, I'm aware of higher, more occult level, mathematical subjects like, say, transfinite numbers, set theory, etc. Right? There are varying magnitudes of infinity or eternity, and these eternities are archetypes to time. And this all goes back to the existence of an infinite number of parallel universes. But this subject in of itself is a very, very grand and comprehensive, very, very esoteric and very much occult Kabbalistic subject, which ties in a lot of very, very advanced, complex and occult mathematics, which is well beyond the kinescope of this video. Nevertheless, time is essentially circular, being based on the revolutions of the Elohim vis-a-vis the luminaries. Ergo, the entire construct, that is the entire construct of Asiya, our entire construct and its attributes are circular in nature. Time essentially can be thought of as a series of concentric circles, right? Vis-a-vis wheels within wheels, going to the Ophanim. The Hebrew word Ophan means wheel, and these Ophanim are known as wheels, and they are Elohim. And it is these Elohim, these very powerful, secret Elohim that are rarely mentioned in the ancient Holy Scriptures, that are responsible for time. They are the overlords over time. They are the gods of time. It's very, very Kabbalistic, esoteric subject. Okay? We need to understand Kabbalistically again, and this again is another huge, massive, comprehensive Kabbalistic subject dealing with the ordering of time, is that one Aeon, which in Hebrew Kabbalah is occultly known as a Shemitah, is 7,000 years. And one epoch, or a Yobel, is 50,000 years. And one Yobel contains 7 Aeons. And these Aeons are revolving. We got 7 revolutions in each Yobel. And these Yobels are revolving. And then we have smaller ages within the Aeons that are revolving within the Aeons. So you can think of the different sets of time as circles within circles. Think of a clock, right? A clock represents one order of time. Superimpose another clock, which represents another order of time, and then superimpose another clock, which represents another order of time. This is the great mystery of the wheel within a wheel that is mentioned in Sefer Yechezkel, because Sefer Yechezkel is a very, very esoteric, Kabbalistic, astrological text. Now, this is the mystery of what we read in Sefer Bereshith in chapter 2, verse 4, where it states, "These are the generations of the heavens and the earth," telling us that there are multiple generations of the heavens and the earth. I've already told you that on one Kabbalistic level, we can think of the heavens and the earth as representing a very supernal incorporeal archetype, and then subsequent images being reproduced from that archetypal seal. On one level, these subsequent reproductions or images would represent the generations of the archetypal heavens and earth. On another Kabbalistic level, this represents the revolution of the constant creation and destruction of the heavens and the earth. This is why we read in Sefer HaZohar in Book 3, Folio 61b, it states, "HaKadosh Baruch Hu created and destroyed several worlds and aeons before the present one was made." Of course, we should already know this. The account of creation begins with a previous destruction of the heavens and the earth, talking about the current creation of our current heavens and earth in this universe of Asiya. Fast forward to the book of Revelation, and it talks about the upcoming destruction of the present heavens and earths that we inhabit in this aeon, going to a new creation of another heavens and earth in the upcoming aeon. This is all very esoteric, all very Kabbalistic. And again, this is a very huge, comprehensive Kabbalistic subject that many mysteries branch out just from this mystery in and of itself. Okay? Now we go on to speak on the mystery of Shabbath and how it's related to Maaseh Bereshith. Okay? We need to understand as holy initiates and holy adepts that in the esoteric Kabbalah, Shabbath is an occult symbol that represents Shekhinah, our Heavenly Mother. The moon is another occult symbol that represents Shekhinah, our Heavenly Mother. Okay? Now let us go through some of the scriptural Kabbalistic proofs of this. Okay? The first word of Maaseh Bereshith is Bereshith, which can either mean in the beginning or it can mean the beginning. Okay? Now, we can permute this word into 2 words, which are Yor Shabbath, which is Hebrew for Shabbath illuminates. So here, the first word of the Torah, mystically, through its permutation, alludes to a mystical equation between Shabbath and light, telling us that there indeed is a very, very mystical equation, or really just a standard equation between light and Shabbath, because it's telling us that Shabbath illuminates. On another esoteric level of the word Shabbath has 7 preordained divine meanings, as I'm always saying in all of my other videos. We know on one level it's a reference to the 7th day, which is the day of rest. But depending on the nikudim, or the vowel points below the word Shabbath can also be read as Shabbath, which means who is the daughter. Which we should already know is an occult reference to Shabbath being an occult symbol, an occult reference to the daughter of El. or the daughter of God, who really is Shekhinah, our Heavenly Mother. Now, discoursing on the occult symbol, the moon, which in primordial Hebrew is known as Yerach, this word, this ancient primordial Hebrew word Yerach, which is a very primordial archaic word, Hebrew word for moon, has a gematria of 218. Okay, which happens to be equivalent to the gematria of the Hebrew word Ha'orah, which means the feminine light. Right? The Hebrew word Ha'orah, which means the feminine light, has a gematria of 217, which through Imkolel is equivalent to 218. Imkolel being Hebrew with the sum, which is an occult Kabbalistic mathematical principle. Okay? Now, here is where everything comes together, mathematically and Kabbalistically. We know that Shabbath is the seventh day. There's a standard explicit equation between Shabbath and the seventh day. Now, in Hebrew, the seventh day is Hayom Shebi'i, which has a gematria of 358, which just happens to be exactly equivalent to the gematria of the Hebrew word Michodesh, which means from the new moon. Now, this is a most explicit proof equating the Sabbath with the moon, namely that Shabbat is a function of the revolutions of the moon. Now, if you haven't seen my other videos, I have a couple of videos that go through all of the ancient scriptural proofs, both from the exoteric and esoteric Qabbalah. And when I say exoteric Qabbalah, I most definitely mean the Bible. That Shabbat is indeed a function of the lunar phases or the revolutions of the moon. So if you don't know this, if you don't know that Shabbat is based on the moon, then please go and watch those two videos where it will be proven to you without a shadow of a doubt that indeed this is the most ancient correct truth. Now, moving on, the Hebrew word Ha-Shabbath, which means the Shabbath, has a gematria of 707, which is equal exactly to the gematria of the Hebrew word Ishto, which means his wife. Whose wife? Clearly the wife of Hakadosh Baruch Hu. So again, we see Kabbalistically that the word Ha-Shabbath is equivalent to the Hebrew word for his wife. We also know that Shabbath can also mean who is the daughter. And because Shabbath ends with the Hebrew letter Tau, which is a feminine marker in the Hebrew language, we know from all of these proofs that Shabbath is a feminine word. It signifies occultly a feminine hypostasis, in this case, the daughter of God, who is Shekhinah, our Heavenly Mother. Now, we holy initiates and holy adepts, we know this like the back of our hand. This is just very standard knowledge to us, being initiated at a very young age, okay? So to us, being, adepts, in some cases, master Kabbalists, this is like secondhand knowledge. It's obvious to us that Shabbat represents our Heavenly Mother, to any Kabbalist, okay? Likewise, the moon. In this slide here, I'm showing you here, I'm giving you all of these proofs, tying in all of these occult symbols that represent our Heavenly Mother Shekhinah. Which, by the way, as a side note, also proves to you and demonstrates to you that indeed Shabbat is a function of the moon. Okay? Now, all of this is the great essential mystery behind a statement that Yeshua makes in Luke chapter 6, verse 5, where he states that the Son of Man, which is a occult reference to Mashiach, is the Lord of HaShabbath. Now, the underlying Hebrew word that would have been used for Lord would have been Baal, because Baal simultaneously means Lord or husband. He's telling you here that Mashiach is the husband of Shabbath, understanding that Mashiach being the son of God and Shabbath being representing the daughter of God, they are one. The bridegroom and the bride are one. And this goes back to another ancient Kabbalistic mystery that is brilliantly elucidated in our principal Kabbalistic treatises like Sefer HaZohar, where we read in Sefer Devarim in chapter 33, verse 1, it states, Moshe was the Ish of Ha-Elohim. We know that Ish can mean man, yes, but on another level, it can also mean husband. So Kabbalistically, we can translate the verse as Moshe was the husband of Ha-Elohim, Ha-Elohim here then being a Kabbalistic reference to Shekhinah. And so here again, we can see an equation between Moshe and Yeshua, who were both men of Ha-Elohim. Not just men of God, but more explicitly husbands of the goddess, vis-a-vis Shekhinah. So now I end by just briefly reviewing the occult/Kabbalistic mathematics behind these mystical equations between the moon and Shabbath, right? We understand that the seventh day is equated with Shabbath. We should also know mathematically that the sum of the numbers 1 through 7 inclusive is 28. And the number 28 is a very special mathematical number in that it quintessentially approximately represents the duration of the Sigmatic or lunar month. Right? Mathematics is the language behind creation. And understanding this, then we know that the number 28 is symbolic of the Sigmatic or lunar month. And so then knowing this mathematically, we then understand that there is an occult mathematical equation between the numbers 7 and 28. And this is how we are, able to equate the number 7 with the moon, because through transitive, relation, we can then equate the number 7 with the moon. Okay? And we also know that in Gematria, the Hebrew phrase, the seventh day, is equivalent to the Hebrew word from the new moon, telling us that the seventh day is a function of the moon, namely 7 days from the new moon, which is the first day of the month, making the seventh day of the month. It's pretty simple, obvious, and basic if you're an ancient Hebrew like me, and you have a correct ancient Hebrew understanding of time as it is explained in the ancient Torah. Okay? So, in this video, as I'm sure now you should realize, I covered a lot of great Kabbalistic mysteries dealing with Ma'aseh Bereshith, and I touched upon very briefly some very giant Kabbalistic mysteries. And although I didn't do justice, although I didn't fully explain some of the great Kabbalistic mysteries that I touched upon because of their very comprehensive nature, I did nevertheless give you a starting foundation for you to jump off of and go deeper into these Kabbalistic mysteries. So I hope you enjoyed, and more importantly, I hope that you learned a lot. Shalom.